You know what? It's ready. This is so. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi wahdahu. والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue this tremendous treatise entitled Fatwa al-Hamawiyyah al-Kubra by the great Imam Abu al-Abbas Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abd al-Halim ibn Abd al-Salam ibn Taymiyyah الحراني الدمشقي المتوفى سنة 728 بعد هجرة المصطفى عليه الصلاة والسلام. The time now is 8:05 p.m. This day of, technically, still according to the Gregorian calendar, is Wednesday. It's a Wednesday night, as far as with the non-Muslim, the Tariq al-Miladi, with the Gregorian calendar, 2025, which is today. What is this? September the 3rd. September the 3rd. It's currently now, as we know, the new day or night starts. Al-Muwafiqli, al-Tariq al-Islami, al-Hijri. It's currently, what is it, everyone? Is it the 10th of Rabi' al-Awwal? Looks like the 10th. Well, now it's technically it's at the Maghrib, it's the 12th. It's the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal, Am 1447, the year 1447, after the migration of our Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, after we discussed the matters pertaining to him bringing some of the nuqulat, as we know, the naqliyat or the nuqulat, that's from the benefits of this book. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, in this particular book called al-Hamawiyyah, you'll find that he mentioned a lot of nuqulat, meaning conveying statements of different ulama of Ahl Sunnah. Then you'll find that he mentioned those who was affected by ilm al-kalam. However, you'll find that he mentioned them in order to establish the proof against those who are in opposition against the Kitab al-Sunnah. So he utilized their own scholars by conveying their statements, saying that they are saying what the Kitab and what the Sunnah mentions. So you'll find that he was using their own revered scholars, because their own revered scholars were saying what agreed with Kitab and Sunnah. And you'll find that he mentioned that and utilized that as a strategy to establish the haqq against them. So to now bring statements of the ulama, al-Salafiyun, or those who are upon Ahl Sunnah, then he was bringing the statements of their own scholars, their own esteemed revered scholars amongst themselves, which is, like we said, from those strategies, which are most strongest strategy that one can use one of the strong strategies that one can use to establish the haqq is to find one from their own revered scholars and him saying exactly what we say, or saying exactly what Allah and His Messenger said, in order to establish the proof against them, especially those who are mukhalifun. After we finished the statement of Ibn al-Khafif, as we mentioned that we finished it, you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah started mentioning the statements of ʿAbdur-Razzaaq, rahimahullah. This is what we mentioned last class. We talked about, as you know, everyone, what is from those prevalent affairs that are taking place today, that a lot of the Muslims became misguided by, was a turuq al-Sufiyah. الطرق الصوفية. And we know الطرق الصوفية كثيرة. There's a lot of ways of Sufiya. They call them tariqa, a specific way, or a specific method of Sufiya. From those famous methods of Sufiya is Qadiriyah, which is a tariqa of tasawwuf. Especially in these days, it is from those widespread turuq of tasawwuf. Notice Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah back then, for that tariqah or that type of method of tasawwuf was famous then. In comparison to now, if you look at our date, which is 1447, in comparison to what Shaykh al-Islam where he lived during 728, which is approximately how much everyone was? 600-700 years. And back then, that tariqah of tasawwuf was widespread, which is called Qadiriyah. And to this day, you'll find that there are people that follow here in America that same form of tasawwuf called Qadiriyah. It's here in America. There's people that follow that tariqah of tasawwuf. And those other different paths of tasawwuf, everyone, where tasawwuf, as we know, is extremely dangerous upon the ummah, where it is utilized in order to render them in a very weak state, because it's considered from those ahzab, from those different parties and schisms and furaq, and those firaq, those deviant sects that have rendered the Muslims in a very weak state. So those matters you'll find Shaykh al-Islam was conveying here. We'll read it quickly. So you'll find, like we mentioned, we talked about the history of Abdul Qadir Jilani, rahimahullah. As we mentioned in the statement, if we go back to it, matter of fact, we started in the statement where he said, I'll just read it quickly at the beginning. سنبدأ من أول الفقرة. It says, ومن متأخريهم الإمام أبو محمد عبد القادر ابن أبي صالح الجيلي. Remember we said what was mentioned, which is Jili, which was his ascription. He was ascribed to a land from Jil. Then where you could put at the end of it the alif and the noon, Jilani or Jailani. So it's either mentioned as Jili or Jaili or Jilani or Jailani. But that's what we're speaking about here. And like we said, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, everyone, again, that you'll find that is from the famous methods of tasawwuf. So again, what do they call that tariqah? They call it tariqah al-Qadiriyah. An ascription to who? Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. So keep in mind what we mentioned concerning him last class. We said you'll find that he was known, Abdul Qadir Jilani, you'll find he's also known by his kunya, Abu Salih. In his book called al-Ghunyah, you'll find that he is mentioned by his kunya a lot within a lot of different books. But as we know, his name was Abdul Qadir al-Jailani, in which we talked about last class. A lot of those from the Muslims they were put to trial and test by him. Even though the ulama praised him in regards to what was his status amongst the people. As we talked about last class, he was an alim, and you'll find that he followed the madhab of al-Hanbali, but as we know, even though he was upon the madhab, he followed the kitab and sunnah. So in actuality, he was Salafi, rahimahullah. As we talked about last class, he lived in Baghdad. And we know at that time, Baghdad, it was considered Asimat al-Ilm, wal-Ma'rifah, wal-Deen. That Baghdad at that time was considered the Asima. It was considered the capital of knowledge, of knowledge and other affairs. As we talked about, everyone, if you look and study the history of Baghdad, which is in Iraq, in those years, due to the fact that the people were found Kitab and Sunnah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unlocked other doors of knowledge to them. When they held on to what was correct, upon the methodology which the Messenger of Allah was upon, his companions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed the society until it started opening, unlocking other doors of knowledge, where you'll find that they started to now excel in affairs of medicine, in the affairs of science, and in the affairs of communal services, where you'll find that the Muslims were the one that started the affairs of sewers, education, math. You'll find that math and al-Jabr goes back to the Muslims. Hygiene, all those affairs. And you'll find that the West, they were savages. They were disgusting. Used to pee, poop used to be everywhere, even under the nails. You'll find that the affairs of the Muslims, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they held on to Kitab and Sunnah, is when they evolved where medicine, they started gaining great knowledge of medicine. And we know that that is the knowledge in which was encouraged after the person learned Kitab and Sunnah. What's the second knowledge which is bonded upon them? You'll find in our religion where they tell the people they should learn, which is what? Medicine. And from the great doctors was al-Allama ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, and other than that. Anyway, that particular land of Baghdad, you'll find that Abdul Qadir Jilani lived during that time. Now listen what the great Imam, Sheikh Muhammad al-Jami, rahimahullah, what he said about al-Jilani. This is what he says. He says, عُرِفَ بِالصَّلَاحِ وَالتَّقْوَى وَإِجَابَةِ الدَّعْوَةِ وبالكرامات لما كانت هذه بعض أوصافه فلما كانت هذه بعض أوصافه غلا فيه بعض الناس كما غلا كثير من الناس في بعض الصالحين ولكن غلو الناس في هذا العبد الصالح يعني الشيخ عبد القادر الجيلاني الذي نقول إنه عبد صالح بناء على ترجمة العلماء له ولا نزكي على الله أحدا الله أعلم بعمله ولكن على الرغم من ذلك غلا فيه كثير من الناس عربا وعجما فهو كما قلنا غير ما مر لم يعلم في تاريخه أنه خرج من بغداد. To the end of what we mentioned about him. You'll find the great Imam Muhammad al-Jami rahimahullah. He said that Abdul Qadir Jilani rahimahullah, he was known for salah, for righteousness and piety. So that puts a perspective of a person educating themselves. So now, if you hear the so-called tariqah of tasawwuf, what they call Qadiriyah, you'll know that it is ascribed to who? Abdul Qadir Jilani, Abu Salih. And we said that Abdul Qadir Jilani was known for what? Uprightness and piety. He was also known for his supplications to be answered. He was also known for that during his time. He would supplicate to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer it. He was also known from those affairs what they call karamat. Karamat meaning those astonishing affairs that Allah also allows to happen at the hands of those who follow the Sunnah. So, when this was his descriptions, everyone, what happened usually when people find these descriptions in an individual, they end up falling into what? Ghulu. They end up falling into affairs of extremism. So a lot of those you'll find that they come, especially during the times of Prophet Nuh, alayhi salatu wasalam. How did the shaitan creep in? He utilized people who are what? Righteous. And this was the trick of the shaitan in every time, in every place. Fi kulli zaman. someone that was truly righteous and upon tawheed and upon what was correct and what pleases Allah, the shaitan utilized that as a method to what, everyone? As a method to now plant the seed in which you'll find what was utilized as affairs connected to worship, until you'll find that was also utilized was images and pictures. When the images and pictures was utilized, the shaitan gradually utilized the emotions of the people. Utilize the emotions of the people. Okay, are you taking pictures of the masjid? Is there a reason behind that?
Yeah, I am so pleased to come to find the masjid called Masjid bin Baz. I am so pleased with the title of the masjid. Actually, I was there in the campus and I started to search for a masjid. I found Ahmadiyya.
مبثوث مباشرة عبر الخط يسمعك
I found
الكل.
Ahmadiyya masjid. Of course, I will not go there until I found the Masjid Ibn Baz. I said, this is a great place, a great center. Rahimahullah, Sheikh bin Baz, Rahimahullah, one of the great scholars.
We're online. There's a lot of people listening. Just excuse me.
Yeah.
Just to let you know.
No?
We're online. It's widespread. It's a live global.
Yes, but alhamdulillah, it is great gathering the brothers again, mashallah, seeking knowledge, and me, one of the great scholars, Rahimahullah. Balanced in his approach.
Just when you record or take pictures, make sure you get permission. I don't like when people take my picture.
Just took for the prayer times for you.
Okay, Jazakallah.
That's what it took.
May Allah grant you tawfiq.
MashaAllah, جزاكم الله كل خير for your efforts. ورحم الله Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, رحم الله Sheikh Ibn Baz. But the title itself attracted me to come to drive from the campus.
جزاكم الله خير. موفق. ونحن نزوركم نستقبلكم في أي وقت. تأتي نستقبلكم استقبالا جميلا.
الله يحفظكم.
تفضل خذ راحتك ما نظرفكم.
My daughter is there in the campus will be going home with me tonight. That's why I just came for them from
جزاك الله خير. بارك الله فيك.
بارك الله فيكم.
أنتم نرحب بكم في ونحتفي ونرحب بكم في أي وقت. أنا الآن أدرس الناس وأعلم الناس.
brothers and sisters in Palestine إن شاء الله.
كلنا في نفس دائما نلح في الدعاء إخواننا السلام عليكم. طيب, so what we mentioned, everyone, you'll find that as a result of those who went to the extremes in regards to these matters, in regards to the extremes of these particular matters, you'll find that even during the time of Nuh, Shaitan utilized these traps. For anyone, even if they were righteous, if they were known for piety and uprightness, the shaitan utilized that as a trap. Either over time planting a seed and utilizing after a time where the people start to now raise them above their level until the extreme affairs take place, and then they end up worshiping them. The same thing happened with ʿabdur-Razzaaq, rahimahullah, same thing. You'll find that due to the fact that Allah blessed him to have these characteristics of nobility and honor and piety, what did the people of Tasawwuf do? They took advantage of it in order to now raise him above his level until they raised him to the level of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'll find that that was from the affairs in which those upon Tasawwuf today fell into. In regards to ʿabdur-Razzaaq, what Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah is mentioning about here. And if that was during the time of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, what do you think you would see now? But Shaykh al-Islam was utilizing this in order to put in perspective what was the proper position in regards to ʿabdur-Razzaaq and using it against those who so-called follow his way, or those who are upon Tasawwuf, what they call Tariqa Qadiriyah. If that was back then what would the affair be now if he heard what they say about him today? As you'll find, like we said, those from amongst the people, from the Arab and the non-Arab, went to extremes in regards to him. And he said it's not been established, and it's the reason why I'm mentioning this now. It's not been established in history that he left Baghdad. Why am I mentioning this, everyone? The reason why I'm mentioning this, because you'll find that there are graves that are worshipped. They worship in graves claiming that it's the grave of ʿabdur-Razzaaq in different lands. So keep in mind, what was the key point here in which you'll find the great Imam Muhammad Ahmad Jami is mentioning. He's saying he never left Baghdad. What is he giving? What is he alluding to? That those other graves that are worshipped are all what? Fabricated. Due to the fact that it's not been known that he left Baghdad. So it's a reason why we're mentioning this. So he never left Baghdad. And he lived there and he died there. And he also was what? Buried there. So his qabr or his grave is where? It's in Baghdad. It's in Baghdad. And if now if you was to go travel the world, you'll find that there's graves, shrines, or what have you, what they call mazarat and adriha. Graves, which is in different lands. Some of them claim that his grave was in Africa. And some of them say it's in Asia. And some of them say it's in the Dual al-Arab, or some of the Arab lands, in the name of ʿAbdur-Razzaaq Jailani rahimahullah. Where did this come from? Like we said, we'll mention that within a minute. What we established clearly here is that he was everyone. Where did he live? He lived in one place, which is where? That's all you have to remember. If you remember that point, then you can now rebuttal a lot of nonsense that people come with. He only lived one place, and that was in Baghdad, and that's it. And he died one death, which was there also. So why all these different graveyards or graves of this individual in so many different places? To let you know how the shaitan still sets the same trap of old to now current times. Hasn't changed. Same method, same way, in order for the people to fall to the greatest sin that any human being can commit, which is worse than killing and murder, which is at the top of the list, which is called polytheism. Once the shaitan has now trapped a human being and fall into that trap, then everything else is easy for him to fall into. Once the affair of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been destroyed, that root, then like we said, all the other ills or social ills of society falls right into place. So that's the reason why you'll find that we took the opportunity, we're taking the initiative to mention and clarify that he only lived in one place. So what is the reason of why these people fall to this extremism? What happened is the shaitan decorated to a lot of the common Muslims, or anyone similar to the common Muslims, until you'll find that some of them, due to their ignorance, what they'll do is, or they will claim that the devil comes to them in their mind and inspire them a specific type of dream. And then they'll wake up and claim that they say, I've seen Abdul-Qadir Jilani. I've seen Abdul-Qadir Jilani in such and such nation, or such and such place, or such and such mountain, or such and such tree, until what will happen? They'll build a grave there. So all of these are the different traps that the shaitan set up for the people. And what do the Sufis utilize as their so-called way to practice, or to utilize certain practices? Dreams and visions. Dreams and visions in which they so-called utilize. So you'll find in those dreams that they so-called utilize, they built a grave in, whether it be in that mountain or be here or in different places in Africa, like we mentioned. Even though we know that Abdul-Qadir Jilani, rahimahullah, is free from this type of so-called shirk. You'll find that they even say in some of their so-called bayt, what's so strange is what they call aqtab, or qutub, we'll talk about. And you'll find that that's some of the terms of tasawwuf that they use, of someone that's of high esteem or high respect. They call it qutub, but the plural is aqtab. What's so strange is you'll find that even their so-called revered people, their aqtab, go to Mecca to perform Hajj. They even go where? They go to Mecca to perform Hajj during the time of Hajj. You'll find there's a poetry that they mention and say concerning this. They say, كل قطب يطوف بالبيت سبعا وأنا البيت طائف بخيامي. He said every qutb, he said he goes to Mecca to perform tawaf, going around the Kaaba 7 times. Now listen to what they claim that he says. He said, but however, I am the house in which the individual goes around my tent. So you'll find that these type of affairs are myths, and what knowledge, if a person is ignorant of their religion, this is what you will fall into. Going somewhere in another land, performing Hajj. going around a tent thinking that you're performing what? Hajj. This is what ignorance will do to an individual if one does not have the ardent desire to learn their religion in order to remove from themselves ignorance. And we know that the present current day Sufis, who are what they call Jama'at al-Tabligh, they call to this nonsense. Rather, if we have some time, I will, and inshallah, we will have some more time, bi'idhnillah, speaking about what is the actual motives of the Sufis. You'll find that they're also political people. People would think this is worship. There's political agendas behind it also. People will think, oh, they're just people of worship and devoted to. And if we have more time, I would bring the reports of Muhammad Ilyas al-Kandahlawi, who is the mu'assis of Jama'at al-Tabligh. Read some of his statements where it was a political agenda also. It was politically inspired. Everything is about power and money at the end of the day. It's not worship, just worshiping Allah. No. Muhammad Ilyas al-Kandahlawi, who was the founder of Jama'at al-Tabligh, if you read some of his statements, is politically motivated, ulterior motives, because at the end of the day, it's about power and money. And he utilizes those different ways, so-called worship, in order to now have something for the people to gravitate towards it. Because if it's something that's not inspiring to the people, they're not going to want to do it. So now in order to put it in form in some way that the people will gravitate towards it or lean towards it, then he utilized that to get the followers that he wanted in order to attain the goal, the ultimate goal in the end. But keep in mind, like we said, Jama'at al-Tabligh, who's the founder of it? Muhammad Ilyas al-Kandahlawi. Muhammad Ilyas al-Kandahlawi, who's the founder of what is considered modern day Sufiya, which is Jama'at al-Tabligh, which you'll find that Imam al-Albani rahimahullah called it Sufiyatun Asriya. Modern day Sufi of today is in the form of Jama'at al-Tabligh. You'll find that they go to lands by the millions. By the millions. You'll be surprised. From Saudi Arabia, from different Arab lands, from America, to from Britain, to different places in Africa, all to rally to this one land where they meet in by the millions of people who are upon this guidance. So that is to put in perspective that numbers is not the what? It's not the criteria in which we distinguish between truth and falsehood. And when they arrive to those particular lands, you know what they say? You know what they say? What I've been teaching you guys for the past 2 years, teaching everyone. They say the statement of Ibn Arabi, al-Hatimi al-Ta'i. When I heard this and I read this, I couldn't believe it. I was like, exactly. That's the ultimate goal right there. Ibn Arabi. So Jama'at al-Tabligh gets all these followers, and they say it's 5 million people. 5 million upon practicing polytheism. They're upon the truth, they're upon Batil. You'll find that they come off and they started now saying the statement of Ibn Arabi and Hatim al-Ta'i, alayhi min Allah ma yastahiq, saying the poetry. Al-Abdu Rabbun wal-Rabbu Abdun falayta shi'ri man al-Mukallaf فإن قلت عبدا فذلك الرب وإن قلت ربا فأنا يكلف. He said in his poetry, the servant is Allah, the servant is the Rabb is the servant. How can anybody be burdened with anything? And if you say that it's the servant, then that is the Lord. And if you say he is the Lord, how can you be burdened to do anything? Meaning, the obligations have been what? Removed from you. Millions of people repeating this. Can you imagine this? Repeating this poetry. By the thousands and the millions. This particular poetry, which is filled with the most filthiest of affairs. So, in regards to that, what we're mentioning, everyone, if we have some more time, we'll speak about this a little bit more in detail. But anyway, here in this particular instance, look to the misguidance here. The misguidance here is pertaining to what everyone, كل قطب يطوف بالبيت سبعا وأنا البيت طائف بخيامي. He said, all the aqtab, they go to Mecca to perform Hajj or Umrah, going around the Kaaba 7 times. He says, I am the house. This is what they claim. It's a lie. I am the house of which the one performing circumambulation that goes around my tent. It goes around my tent. So, that we mentioned in this regard, For what would be a person that studies would know that going around a tent would be sufficient to perform Hajj or Umrah, and that the tent of those so-called others from any other one is considered just some regular tent you would go around, but his specifically is something special about it. Until even the followers, you'll find that they what? Perform circumambulation around it, which is a lie upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his religion, and misguiding the Muslims and taking advantage of them. In which you'll find that al-Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, which is tarjama, which we'll talk about when we have some more time. But anyway, you'll find that that everyone who worship or raise the individual above their level until they worship them, we know the ayat in the Quran that all of them on the day of resurrection will free themselves from them. Free themselves from their own followers who worship them, and that from those head of them is Prophet Jesus, Isa, ibn Maryam, alayhi salatu wassalam. From all of those who raised him above his level until they made him Allah, is the same thing that the shaitan utilized in order to trap the others from the Muslims with the same ideology. How many from those we know that Isa was raised to the level of worship, to the point where they made him a part of Allah or Allah himself, or to the point where you see even written on some of the churches, Jesus is Lord. You'll find that. Look to the same trap that the shaitan utilized in order to trap the Muslims and misguide by the same ideology. Raising someone above their status, being extreme, having that blind fanaticism, raising them higher and higher and higher until they fell into worship that individual, which Prophet Isa, alayhi salatu wasalam, we know will free himself from those who worship him on the day of resurrection, due to the fact that he never commanded the people to worship him. And similar to that, ʿAbdur-Razzaaq rahimahullah will free himself from those who raised him above his level until the point where they made him either Allah or above Allah, to the point where you even say in some of the athar, you'll find they say a statement that is very uglified, very vilified. From the followers of Abdul Qadir Jilani, they'll say statements such as Allah fell and Abdul Qadir Jilani picked him up. From those type of affairs, which shows you how extremism can take an individual from the highest levels of misguidance. Extremism can take a person to the most highest levels of misguidance. Look to the Christians. Look what they say about Isa ibn Maryam. And to the point where the Sufis fell into this, similar to that, whereas now they raise Abdul Qadir Jilani above this level in which he will free himself from these different types of statements and the followers and the people who utter these statements. So let's keep going. Due to the fact that do we say that these righteous people, at the heads of them, the prophets, such as Isa ibn Maryam, and from those who followed the sunnah and the message of Allah, such as Abdul Qadir Jilani, are they considered tawaghit? No. Due to the fact that they never commanded the people to what? Worship them. So even those who are righteous, prophets and messengers, and people who follow the sunnah, rahimahumullah, they are not to be blamed for the people falling to extremism as it pertains to them. Why? Because they never, what do we want? They never commanded the people to what? Worship them. It was a lie. And that's the reason why we know that they will free themselves from them, and anything worship besides Allah will also free themselves from their worshippers. So let's keep going. Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah qala fi kitab al-Ghunya. So you'll find Abdul Qadir Jilani has a book called al-Ghunya, the adequacy, if you want to say for the roughly translated, what suffices, or the adequacy. That's the name of the book, al-Ghunya. So Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, everyone, conveys statement from Abdul Qadir Jilani out of this book called al-Ghunya, to put in proper perspective of what he was upon, where everyone, in his aqidah. Because the thing that makes a person great in our religion is not being an actor, it's not being a musician, it's not being a person that was known in non-Muslim politics. What raises people in our religion is those who cling to what's correct and they're a person of piety. Anyone who's rappers or singers or anyone else, those are not considered people glorified with us. Who's glorified with us are those who are trying to remain firm and steadfast upon Kitab and Sunnah. And they're trying to fear their Lord and meet Allah and die upon that. And they're trying to rectify their religion and cure their heart of any illnesses, whether it be in creed or actions or sins or what have you, and trying to work diligently in preparation to the meeting with their Lord. Those are the people that we raise. Those are the people that we also hold in high esteem. And those who traverse the path of proper knowledge. Those are the people we respect and hold in high esteem. But now it's the opposite. Rappers are glorified, and the people who's trying to fear Allah are lowly in the eyes of the people. At any rate, so what we're mentioning now is, what was the aqidah of ʿabdur-Razzaaq? What was his belief? That's what we need to investigate. And that's what Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah in this particular statement is conveying here. So now this is what he says. He puts in his book called, or he conveys from his book called al-Ghunya. He says, أما معرفة الصانع بالآيات والدلالات على وجه الاختصار فهو أن يعرف ويتيقن أن الله واحد أحد. He says, so Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah is conveying the statement of Abdul Qadir Jilani here. So he says, أما معرفة الصانع, as for knowledge of a صانع, the word صانع means خالق, creator. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Is it permissible to call Allah صانع, or can you make from it a name? Like for example, Abdul Sani. No, we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's permissible to call yourself, name yourself Abdul Khaliq. We'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, he says, knowledge of a Sani'. Is it permissible to say that Allah is Sani'? Yes, but not to take from it what? A name. We'll talk about that in a minute. And having knowledge of a Sani' by the signs, bil ayat, and indications, in a manner that is summarized, على وجه الاختصار, in a manner that's summarized. And that is to have knowledge and have surety that Allah is wahidun ahad. That Allah is one, and He's alone that deserves to be worshipped. So this is the statement of Abdul Qadir Jilani here, clearly stating what is his belief. So he's not upon the belief of who? The people Tasawwuf, or those who follow the so-called Tariqa al-Qadiriyah. This is his statement. Notice that Shaykh al-Islam strategically is utilizing it to refute who? The people upon Tasawwuf who follow his so-called Tariqa, which he never did, which he never established or made in the first place. So he said to have knowledge of Allah by the ayat. The ayat, everyone breaks down into three categories. Write this down. Number one, write it down. The first type of ayat, everyone, is ayat matuluwah. If you want to call them ayat shar'iyah, you can. Signs which is in Allah's religion. Or the signs that are recited. That's number one. Ayat matuluwah. The signs of Allah that are recited, which is from Kitab al-Sunnah. And if you want to call it ayat shar'iyah, you can. Ayat which is in the shara' of Kitab al-Sunnah. So you have ayat matuluwah that are recited. Then you have the second category, which is ayat kawniyah mushahada, signs which is in the creation that are witnessed, are seen. And I think that's clear for the signs that you see within the moon, the stars, human beings, the night, the day, wa haluma jarra, and so on and so forth. And the last one, ayat, is called mu'jizat, the miracles of the prophets and messengers. You'll find that they call them mu'jizat, which is something that is established or that which is known amongst the people. However, you'll find that from the great Imam Muhammad Aman, he mentioned it, said that it's more befitting that we call it ayat, signs, because the miracles of the prophets and messengers in actuality, Allah Himself called it what, everyone? Signs. Allah called it ayat. From the splitting of the moon, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His book called it an ayah. And He's seen an ayah. So the ayah is more befitting. But anyway, those are the three categories in which you'll find in Kitab al-Sunnah doesn't go outside of those three. Number one, the signs of Allah amongst what? In His book, Kitab al-Sunnah, which is called ayat matuluwah. Or you could call it ayat shar'iyah. And number two, what is it, everyone? Ayat kawniyah mushahada, signs that are witnessed and seen amongst the creation. And number 3, we mentioned معجزات or ayat, وهي عبارة عن المعجزات التي تجري على أيدي الأنبياء والرسل عليهم الصلاة والسلام. But the third is the miracles. Even though, like we said, it's more befitting that we call them ayat, even though some of them utilize the word miracles. So based upon that, the statement of Abdul Jilani rahimahullah, which is to have knowledge of a sani'. So let's talk about this word sani'. The word sani' in the Arabic language again means khaliq. Khaliq. You'll find there are certain names in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his book mentions, in which is used as a description, not necessarily utilize that a name is taken from it. You'll find that al-Allama ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah rahmatu wasi'ah mentioned that bab al-ikhbar awsa' min bab al-asma' wa sifat. He said that the affair of informing about Allah is more awsa', meaning it's more expansive than the names and attributes of Allah which he's described himself with. Such, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his book describes himself as fa'al. So we can describe Allah as being what? Fa'al. But are we going to take a name from it and say Abdul Fa'al? No, but Allah in his book describes himself as being what? Fa'al lima yurid. It's in his book, clearly. It's in Surah al-Buruj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Fa'al lima yurid. So, the word Fa'al, we can use it in the aspect of describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or informing about Allah. Informing about Him. Not necessarily extracting from it a name and an attribute. So those affairs comes in Kitab and Sunnah. Another affair such as the word that Allah yatakallam, that Allah speaks. We know that the word speaker means mutakallim. We know that Allah is a sifa by himself, that he what? Yatakallam. So now is a person going to name themselves Abdul Mutakallim? Abdul Mutakallim. No. So, informing about Allah, you can say about Allah that He's mutakallim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fa'al, lima yurid, as far as informing about Allah. From those affairs is the word sani', that Allah is a sani'. If it's in the affair or the context of informing about Allah, informing about Him as far as in certain affairs as it pertains to Him. And from them is the word sani'. And there's a narration which comes to Kitab and Sunnah that also affirms that Allah is Sani'u kulli shay. That He's the Sani' of everything. Which there is a narration where the Messenger of Allah did mention the word Sani'. If he had the time, I would give it to everyone. But to say that it's a name extracted from it or attribute, we say what? No. But as they say, min bab al-ikhbar. Oh, stop. I think he's Abdul-Razzaaq. So in regards to that, we mentioned this particular name, Sani'. Again, everyone, it is from those descriptions, or if you want to say ikhbar, informing about Allah, informing about Him. You'll find even the great Imam, he mentions this, Sheikh Muhammad Aman, he says, هذه الأسماء تستعمل في باب الإخبار لا على أنها من أسماء الله الحسنى. باب الإخبار أوسع من باب الأسماء. You'll find that he mentions, rahimahullah, he says about this, he said that these names can be utilized in the aspect of informing about Allah. If informing about Allah, not the fact that it's from His names or it's from His beautiful names or best of names. He said, because the matter of informing about Allah is more expansive than the affair of what? Names and attributes. So let's keep mentioning what Abdul Qadir Jilani. So now if you analyze this statement, everyone, he says, أما معرفة الصانع بالآيات والدلالات على وجه الاختصار. He says, as for knowledge of the Sani', we said that the word Sani' means what again, everyone? Khaliq, ahsant. Then we know him by what? His signs. What are those signs? Those three categories we mentioned. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is known by all of those what? All of those signs. The signs within His religion and how perfect it is. Because if one truly studied the Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah and had the opportunity to really study the religion in depth, you'll see how perfect it is. And it's astonishing where it's no way that religion could be in that type of order and that type of perfection except by the Creator of the heavens and earth. As you'll find in the Kitab al-Sunnah, it's astonishing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has arranged it in such a profound, perfect way. And that's the way in which one can now attain certainty of his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, even from the affairs of the creation, similar to that, by contemplating on the aspects of creation, of how the human body has been perfected by two eyes to see and a tongue so it can convey and talk. All that was what? By someone of complete intelligence. For those type of matters, this is how one can affirm clearly of his Lord. And in addition to that, which you'll find that the ulama mentioned of the signs or the miracles of the prophets, in which you'll find that they have even put in what they call fi mu'allafat mustaqillah, in separate books, what they say and what they call the signs of prophethood, and mentioning the different miracles of the prophets and messengers, especially the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is also from those signs that if one studied, they can clearly affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of His existence and how He also deserves to be worshipped alone. So let's keep going. The third thing before we mention the statement of Abdul Qadir Jilani, he said by the signs and the dalalat. What does that mean? The indications. The indications. That's what we'll talk about within a minute, inshallah, what that means. As you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His book, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to utilize our intellect, to use the mind in order to ponder upon the creation. Just to sum it up, the human aql was, Allah did in His book tell us to utilize it, but however, utilize it in a manner that has been legislated, not in a manner that opposes the revelation. You'll find, and if you want to sum it up, we can sum it up by the title. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, and we'll mention this and we'll continue. In his other book, entitled Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql, just by the mere title shows the intelligence of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah. He said, removing the notion that the intellect came to oppose the revelation. Removing the notion that the mind or the intellect came to oppose revelation. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam in that book called Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql, he constantly said this statement over again, which is what? He says, al-Naql al-Sahih. He said, al-Aql al-Salim al-Sarih la yukhalifu al-Naql al-Sahih. He mentioned this in his book over and over and over. And if you can memorize the statement, memorize it. He says, al-Aql al-Salim al-Sarih la yukhalifu al-Naql al-Sahih. He said that the human untampered with mind that has not been tampered by philosophy, that still is in its pure state, will never oppose revelation. Rather, the mind was made to submit to revelation, not to oppose it. So you'll find that he said here in his book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the human mind to be submissive to the revelation. The people who was affected by philosophy switched it. They made the revelation to follow behind the human mind, and that to give the intellect the power to be the dictator over revelation. Rather, the human mind was created for the opposite, which is that Allah created the intellect and the mind to give it instructions of how it can be utilized. It's just like, for example, you have a dryer. You have it perfected and how a person made it, but you have to have instructions on how to properly use it, or you could possibly break it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfected the human being of how to what? That you have this perfect form, but you have to have instructions knowing how to use it properly, or else you can damage it, hurt it, or render it in a state of destruction. That type of affair of what the human mind was also made to submit to that revelation. So the origin is revelation, and the human mind came to what? Submit to it. The people from the deviant sects switched it from the people of philosophy, and who've been affected by the Muslims from the ways of the Jahmiyyah and the Asha'ira and other than them. They switched it. They said, no, the origin is the intellect. And the intellect is the dictator over what? The revelation of Kitab al-Sunnah. So what did they do, everyone? They misused the intellect in a manner that's not legislated, or in a manner that Allah did not legislate. But Allah in His book did command us to use our intellect in order to understand His Kitab, His Sunnah, and recognize the signs, so it could be led for you to now worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submit to Him. However, the revelation is the asl, and the intellect is only utilized in order for it to understand and be submissive to it. So the aql has its place, but however, it's not the what? Foundation. The revelation is the foundation. And like I said again, listen to the statement of Shaykh al-Islam in his book called Dar al-Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql. He said, al-Aql al-Salim al-Sarih la yukhalifu al-Naql al-Sahih. He said this, the untampered with human intellect would never oppose the revelation, would never oppose a naql al-sahih, of authentic proof that's been sent down by Allah, which is Kitab al-Sunnah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down His revelation. So the human mind was made to submit to the revelation, not to oppose it. And the revelation was made to dictate over the intellect, not the opposite. Is it clear, everyone? Good. So let's continue. So you'll find that Abdul Qadir Jilani, that he said, as for knowledge of the Creator by His signs in those three categories, and the dalalat, and the indications of the mind, of the intellect, meaning utilizing it in the proper way. Understand, everyone? Utilizing it in the proper way, in the manner summarized, that a person has knowledge. Then he mentions the conditions of la ilaha illallah here. Person has knowledge and certainty that Allah is one and alone. So notice he mentioned, first thing was knowledge. Then the second, that it would take you to the level of what? Certainty, yaqeen. Right, so let's keep going. Person having knowledge, which is the opposite of knowledge, which is what? Which opposes what? Ignorance. And certainty, which is the opposite of it again, which is what? Doubt and reluctancy. So a person, all these affairs in which you'll find that the majority of deviant sects call to opposes all those conditions. From the people to tasawwuf, opposing knowledge, and encouraging the people to be ignorant. You'll find that they encouraging the people to be ignorant. And in regards to what that ignorance will lead to, which is the opposite of certainty, which is what? Doubt. When a person doesn't have ilm, he's going to be muttadid. سيضطرد اضطرابا شديدا في الشهادة وفي كلمة الشهادة. وَفِي رَبِّهِ subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person now is muttadid, meaning he's been wrecked in these affairs, and just the mere root of it. Being ignorant, it will lead to other atrocities, such as which is being what? In a state of doubt. Being doubtful and being reluctant, especially in regards to his Lord. Because now, like we said, you don't have the protective shield, you'll be now subjected to all the calls of the devil, which will now make you in a state of either great ignorance, and what comes along ignorance, great ignorance, is other great affairs, which is, like we said, being in a state of doubt and wavering, and a person being reluctant as it pertains to his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have to stop now. Until the Iqamah? Wow. All right, we'll stop here, inshallah. Now we have to stop. We'll stop for the questions. We'll stop here, inshallah. I was more wanted to speak about, but we'll stop here. Any questions about the lesson, anyone? Fadda Najib. صانع صاد ألف نون عين صاد ألف نون عين. For the word صنع. صنع is خلق, means produce, create. If you want to be أدق على وجه يكون حتى تكون أدق معنى هو it means like produce, to produce. But it means like, but here it doesn't mean خالق, just keep it as خالق, it means creator. Certain names as far as an aspect of what informs about Allah. For example, Murid, Yurid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes himself in the Quran as Yurid Allah yatuba alaykum. Yurid alladhina yattabi'una shahawat an tamilu maylan 'azima. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions whatever he wants. He's Murid. He intends. Are we now going to extract from that a name? We're going to call it Ya Abdul-Murid. يصح? ما يصح. ولكن من باب الإخبار يصح. The aspect of informing about Allah is correct. But you're not going to take the word murid and say, oh, so-and-so, yeah, his name is Abdul-Murid. No. You understand, everyone? Another example of that, fa'al. Allah is fa'al lima yurid. It's Surah Al-Buruj, clear. Allah is constantly doing what he does, what he wants. We're going now to call yourself Abdul Fa'al. يصح? Abdul Fa'al. ما يصح. ولكن من باب الإخبار عن الله يصح. As far as informing about Allah, that's what? It's correct. Same thing about Sani', same exact thing. Same exact thing. Anything else, anyone? About the lesson? If this book is too high level, I tell the people don't come. But when a person listens to it, you see how the high level aqidah is so great. Oh, it's magnificent. You understand? It's very exciting. Because it makes sense. Everything that is a kitab and sunnah, especially with Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, agrees with your what? Your fitrah. Agrees with your natural disposition. And it's clear. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, absolutely. You understand, everyone? Like, anything else about the lesson? Nothing? Sure? هل هناك شيء أشكل عليك معناه أزيدك إيضاحا فيه متأكد لا تترددوا أن تستفسروا عن شيء أشكل عليكم. تفضلوا استقبلوا أسئلتكم الآن. تفضل هاتوا. Anything, anyone? هاتوها. ما عندكم شيء متأكدون أنتم؟ لا نكتفي بهذا القدر خلاص. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله